as follows: Dr. Mauvia Baumik, and after that, Dr. Petrikino Sorki. Next, Dr. Subarna Karkun. Next person is Salina Mary VT, ma'am. This is the list. This is the order for this presentation, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So all are here. They have logged in.
Yes, ma'am, they have logged in. First, I request the first person, that is Dr. Mauvia Baumik, Associate Professor, Department of English, Derosio Memorial College, R. Kobalpur, Rajkot Road, Kolkata, to present paper.
Okay.
Very good afternoon to the respected chair and to my fellow participants over here. Am I audible? I hope I'm audible and visible
Yes,
both. Okay.
yes, ma'am, you
Yes.
are audible. You
All
are
right.
audible.
Okay. So at the very outset, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you. And with the kind permission of the chair, I would like to begin my presentation. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Please go on. Please.
Okay. All right. So just a minute. Let me go for the presentation mode. Okay. Is it visible?
Yeah, it is. It
Okay.
is. You
All
can
right.
go full
Okay.
screen if you want.
I think this will be fine because I don't. Okay,
Okay.
okay. Let me just give it a try. Okay.
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, I've gone full screen. Is it visible?
The slide is fine, ma'am. You can carry on. Yeah, it's
Okay.
fine.
All right. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. So as you see, the title of my paper is Dalit Literature and Translation: A Cross-Cultural Journey. I'll be going to the second slide, and I hope the second slide is visible, right, ma'am?
It's not yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right. So now.
Your
Ma'am.
introduction important. Yeah, it is visible now.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So translation, being a crucial tool to communicate sociocultural perspectives, is an integral part of language and literature studies in today's globalized world. And Sandra Berman, one of the famous American translators, points out that the diverse nuances and peculiarities of an original text, when translated, get the possibility to be discussed as issues of interest. She explains that in the process of translation, words and their corresponding meanings get expanded, and thus the texts get an access into another language and different cultural milieu. However, she also points out that it is always a work of ongoing imperfection. The diversity of languages and cultures leaves no scope for perfect translation. So that means that translation, it has got a duality of its own. On the one hand, it's necessary for, making it available to a larger reading public. And on the other hand, it is always filled with imperfections. Now, as far as Dalit literature is concerned, my paper would be focusing on the need for the translation of Dalit literature. Why is it necessary, and whether it is at all possible to go for quote-unquote correct translation. So now, as far as Dalit literature is concerned, we know that Dalit literature is the depiction of all kinds of deprivation and discrimination. It's a tale of exploitation and humiliation. And then on the one hand, there is the sense of acceptance and endurance which had been there since centuries. And then there is the protesting rebellious voice, the assertion of identity. And so when we go through Dalit literature, we find that the concepts of Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram, which are the prime requisites of mainstream literature, those are not applicable in that matter as far as Dalit literature is concerned. And thus, the classical values like balance, restraint, understatement, those also cannot be expected. And as Sharan Kumar Limbale, one of the pioneers of Dalit literature, he points out that there is always a need for alternative aesthetics as far as Dalit literature is concerned. Now, there are two driving forces at work in Dalit literature. One is sorrow, or the pain, the humiliation, and on the other hand, there is the anger, the protesting voice. And this protesting voice is always against the establishment, which had aimed at inculcating, and there is always the aim for Dalit literature to inculcate values so that it might lead to an egalitarian society, a society marked with equality for all and minimum respect for every individual. And Dalit literature is always about the collective experience, and it is always about the community literature. Whenever we find a spokesperson, whenever we find a protagonist of Dalit literature, he or she is always the spokesperson on behalf of his or her community. And then it has, as I was saying earlier, that it has got its revolutionary spirit, and there is the ultimate motto is emancipation from the shackles of casteism. And so Dalit literature is not only about caste, rather it is a realization and an awareness. Now, why do we need to translate Dalit literature? We need to translate it to generate historical awareness and to develop a historical sense. And moreover, it would ensure intercultural dialogues. Apart from this, what is very, very important is that through translation, a space, a niche can be created where the Dalits can relate with the others of the world, whether they be the Australian Aboriginals, whether they be the Black Americans. So this concept of otherhood, that can be put together with the help of translation. And so translation becomes a socio-cultural practice where there is the transformation of the cultural milieus. Now, the problems regarding the translation of Dalit literature are quite a few. Like, say, for example, in Dalit literature, there is always the question of the vectors of power and the hierarchies of privilege. In various layers, there are multiple layers: caste, class, gender. And these are inseparably linked with each other. Then, in most of the cases, the translations are done by the upper castes because those are translations made into English in most of the cases. And so the upper caste people, having the privilege of being educated more than the Dalits of the society, so they in most of the cases are the translators, and they have their own natural impulse and sensibility towards the Dalit texts. Again, there are translators who suffer from a sense of guilt that, the translators themselves hail from the upper castes who had, provided the kind of hegemony in the earlier centuries, because of whom the Dalits, the voices of the Dalits had been throttled since centuries. So that sense of guilt is also there in the psyche of the translators. Moreover, there is another factor which is very important, that since Dalit literature is essentially different from mainstream literature, so translators like, the Canadian professor Alok Mukherjee, who had translated Sharan Kumar Limbale, he said that, there was a need to disabuse myself of the received notions of what constituted proper literature, because proper literature, what he meant was actually mainstream literature. And there is an essential difference between mainstream literature and Dalit literature. So translation was a stupendously difficult task on that, from that perspective. Moreover, another thing which is very, very crucial here is the poetics of Dalit literature, the kind of language, that the choice of the words that the Dalit writers, pick on to. It said that, Dalit literature is all about, it is the delineation of the lived in experience. And in most of the cases, the Dalit writers, they had hailed from the slums, or very, the places which had been dingy and, gloomy. So from there, having, lived for so many years in that kind of ambience, it could not be expected that when the Dalit writers would be writing, that would be projection of something beautiful. Right. So when they wrote, they also wrote about their lived-in experiences in the slums, all the filth and the squalor and the dirt of the society they inhabit, of the space they inhabit. So naturally, the language that they chose, that was the language of their daily lives. And it was, the kind of language that is used in Dalit literature, it's kind of unthinkable to be used in mainstream literature in many cases, because there are abuses, there are filthy words. So the standard literary language has been completely subverted as far as Dalit literature is concerned. And that is why the power of language is very, very strong over there. It's rooted in their struggle, in their struggle for survival, in their assertion of identity. And so it has got its own sharpness, it has got its power, it has got its energy. And as soon as that gets translated, so the linguistic nuances seem to lose flavor and appeal of the original text, because the words, they have the smell of the soil for that matter. And when the translation takes place into other languages, particularly into English, then it undergoes a process of normalization and standardization, and the politics of language, or the subversion of the established poetics, that that faces a kind of a challenge, that faces a kind of a threat, that how to render it in a justified way in English. So there is always that possibility over there. There are also difficulties for the culturally alien readers, or the readers of the target language readers. Like for translation, there is always the source language and the target language. So for the target language readers, there is immense difficulty, because they need to be at the very outset, need to be sensitized regarding the casteist, paraphernalia that is prevalent in the Indian social context, because they are not aware of this essentially casteist nature. So this lack of awareness and sensitivity of the target language readers towards the Indian caste system, that becomes one of the enormous challenges. Then there is the complete ignorance on the part of the foreign readers as far as the portrayal of the Dalits in the Indian epics are concerned. Say, for example, the character of Eklavya. Say, for example, the 5 Dalit boys who had been burnt in Jatugriha, in place of the Pandavas, just to ensure that the Pandavas would be safe. Then there was the character of, there are so many other characters, like, you know, whenever any subaltern character has been presented in an epic, then of course that character has been shown to be subordinated, to be subjugated, to be minoritized. All right, so the foreign language readers, they do not have that kind of awareness of the handling of the Dalits, or the handling of the subalterns in the Indian literature. And then there is also the lack of knowledge about the myth of Brahma, that we have all taken birth, the 4 castes, the 4 varnas have taken birth from the various parts of the body of the creator Brahma. And the Dalits, that is the Shudras had taken birth from the feet of Brahma, and that is why they are meant to be trampled, because they are from the feet of Brahma. So these very concepts are, completely alien to the target language readers. So that is again another challenge for the translator to put through. Finally, we
Uh, uh, I'm sorry, but you'll have to go faster.
yes, ma'am. This is
Yeah,
the last
2
slide.
minutes.
Yeah,
Last 2
yeah,
minutes.
last slide.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
So we find that, translation of Dalit literature is a huge challenge. It's an enormous challenge, because it's an event at the juncture of different languages, literatures, and cultures of the world. But then again, translation is absolutely mandatory, because it opens a range of possibilities for multiple interpretations of various texts, and there can be a comparative scholarship which would enable translated works to be appreciated from different perspectives. And finally, through translation, this Dalit literary works, they can achieve an afterlife of their own, through which the sensitization can be made possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making it within the 10 minutes. And that was a lovely presentation. I really like the way, yeah, I really appreciate the way you've mentioned about Dalit translation is a tale of exploitation, and how Satyam Sivam Sundaram not applicable to that. I'm glad that you highlighted that. Also, when you were talking about how like translation is happening, you were aware of that translation is not just shifting from one language, but where you were talking about concepts shifting into another, and
Exactly.
your stand was pretty visible. Thank you for that paper, lovely one.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the next presenter, if yeah, possible. So is the next presenter here?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Now not audible, ma'am. It's not audible now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it is audible.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so a very good afternoon to the respected chair, Madam Kanti Priya, and also all my fellow presenters. Thank you, Chair, for the time. The title of my paper is Traditional Calendar System of the Angami Nagas, a descriptive study. But before I present, I would really like to wish, I wish to really thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be, to participate in the conference. And with that, also, I would like to apologize that I will not be able to put up a PPT. Something, I don't know, something conked out with my laptop and I just could not, fix it. So my apologies. So to begin, so I'm just going to present a very concise form of the paper that I have prepared because of the time constraint. So let me just introduce who is an Angami, sort of to pull things into context, all the informations into context. But I hope that I will put across, enough information. Yeah, so let me first introduce Nagaland. Nagaland is a state located in the northeast part of India, inhabited by a conglomeration of 17 major tribes, along with other sub-tribes, amongst which the Angami is also a major Naga tribe. Now, the major tribes consist of the Angami, the Ao, Chakasang, and so on. Just to shorten the time, I won't be mentioning all the tribe names. Now, out of this structural composite group of Naga tribes, 10 tribes, namely Angami, Chakasang, Rengma, Ziliang, Pochuri, Pomai, Maram, Mau, Tangal, and Impu, form the Tinimia people, which is a community with the largest speakers of the standard language of and share a single largest socio-cultural and political identity in Nagaland. And so, as I mentioned, Angami is a part of the Tinimia community. Now, the Angamis occupy the southern part of Nagaland, that is the Kohima district, which is also the capital of the state of Nagaland. Now, in sync with all the other tribes of Nagaland, the Angamis were basically an agrarian community with animalistic belief system. Traditionally, they lived in complete political isolation and were governed by traditional political institutions until the advent of the British into the hills of the Nagaland. Now, with the coming of the British rule, the British traditional, the pristine traditional state of the tribes was shaken, and the social structure of the Nagas, including the Angamis, experienced a sea of change. Their isolation also ended with the opening up of communication with the outside world. Now, simultaneously, the spread of Christianity and education brought in by the Americans brought about a different moral outlook, wherein the old philosophy of life, for example, animism, began to disappear. Now, ever since, the old traditional values changed tremendously. This necessitates all traditional practices and belief systems of the Nagas to be researched and recorded, lest they become mere narrative relics of history of the past. Now, there has been observed that so far negligible research has been done on the traditional calendar system, which the Angamis followed. Therefore, this paper is a humble attempt to carry out a descriptive study into the traditional calendar system of the Angami Nagas and investigate into the significance it embodies of the social, cultural, and traditional agrarian activities of the Angami Nagas. The study also, my paper also attempts to study the ways in which the various festivals of the Angami Nagas are intrinsically connected to the traditional timeline of their agricultural activities and other cultural activities as well. Data has been collected through interviews as well as secondary sources. Now, the Angami traditionally would plan their activities according to the changes of season. The agricultural activities depended a lot on the condition of the seasons. The people had the skill to observe temperature, rain, heat, cold, everything that's to do with the weather that were specific to different seasons. Now, the people could observe that the sun and the moon appear on different points in the sky on different seasons. And they began to call day as Tiso in Angami and night as Tizi on the basis of the presence of the sun and the moon. So traditional folklore says that the sun, this is to do with the Angami folktale. Now, the sun and the moon are regarded by the Angamis as male and female. male and wife respectively. The sun, being a woman, is afraid to go out at night and therefore moves out during the day. So that's the sun. Her husband coming out at night, that's the moon. Now, this indicates that the proper scientific reading of the solar system was far from the knowledge of the traditional Angamis. However, the Angamis had their rural way of reading different seasons and accordingly plan their economic activities and ritualistic activities as well. The Gregorian calendar system, which is also being followed now by the Angamis, has 12 months in a year, we all know, although these months today are generally compared with the English calendar, which is now in use for all practical purposes, as far as the Angamis are concerned as well. The traditional Angami months does not actually coincide with English calendar months, the Gregorian calendar. Now, in contrast to the Gregorian calendar, the Angami calendar is lunar in nature. Thus, it is much shorter than the solar year. The festivals of the Angamis do not fall on the same day every year, even though there is never a difference of more than 7 days. Now, there are certain months in Angami calendar which are joyous for the people. Some months are busy for the people. Some months are marked by unfavorable weather, sadness, or even economic scarcity, especially when the granary, right, starts to deplete, starts getting empty. Now, festivals are thus, the Angamis, the festivals are thus observed only during the prosperous months in the Angami calendar. Amongst many, the most important festival in the Angami calendar is the Sekrini, which is observed in the month called Kezi, which coincides with the month of February in the Gregorian calendar. Now, during the festival, the people pray for good health of the entire community during the coming year. The festival entails for the cleansing or sanctification of the young male members of the community, who might have to participate in wars, traditionally the headhunting practices during the coming year. The Sekrini festival therefore marks the beginning of the new year of the Angami, when the people sanctify themselves to start everything afresh for the new year. Now, Sekrini festival is also followed by another festival called Ngoni, which falls in the Gregorian month of April, Kera in Angami. In the festival, which marks the beginning of all agricultural activities of the Angamis, the commencement of sowing in the field, in the paddy fields, and before that, so the prayer is put up to the god, to Okupenyofa, the supreme god, to bless the people with good harvest, and which are these two are two distinctive features of the festival Moni. So accordingly, the Angamis have 12 months, and the name of each month are given according to the changes of the season and different nature of agricultural works, which especially paddy field related works. Angamis also fix their festivals in different months and seasons in perfect harmony, therefore, with the agricultural works. As I mentioned, Angamis were, a purely, agrarian community traditionally. Now, out of the 12 months, there are only 6 months where the festivals are held, and the other 6 months are without festivals. The months Kezi, Kera, Chatsa, Cherie, which I don't think you all will understand now, are the months with festivals, and the other 6 are without it. The month of Dosa, which is the month of January in the Gregorian calendar, is the month in which all the death rituals, as far as Angamis are concerned, are performed. So I will leave out, some parts of my presentation, but again, in contrast to the Gregorian calendar, the Angamis have one extra month, that is the 13th month. The 13th month happens when days are subtracted for festivals. Unlike the calendar year, the Angamis subtract the days following their lunar calendar, wherein they count only 29 days in each month. That is why 15 days comes earlier than the calendar year. Thus, in about 2 years, there is a difference of 30 days. More so, counting only 29 days for each 12 months, only 348 days make a year for the Angamis. So as a result, within 2 days, 2 years time, there occurs an extra month, which is counted as the 13th month year. Therefore, there arises the necessity to describe to decrease or subtract the days and not add like the Gregorian calendar does to adjust the time for the different festivals. Now, subtracting of days is only done during Terhuni festival, which falls in the month of Dosa, so that they can adjust the time from the beginning of the year again. This is done once in every 4 months, unlike the leap year in the Gregorian calendar. Now, as aforesaid, the Angamis followed the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar, we all know, is based entirely on the motion of the moon around the Earth. Now, one lunar month is equal to, we all know, 29.53 days. The lunar system of reckoning days and month is therefore considered as very convenient because anyone can see for oneself the moon and get the idea of approximate date in a month. For the Angamis, a chosen elder of the community is a chosen elder of the community only performs this supposedly sacred task. It is considered a sacred thing, for the entire community. And he would read the moon and then, call out the new year. Now, I like the Gregorian calendar, where the calendar year is divided into 4 seasons. Even the Angamis, the calendar too is divided into 4 seasons, namely Tiso, Mete, Ter, and Baye. Now, Tiso, this season has 4 months. That is Dosa, Kezi, Kera, Kesha, which are January, February, March, and April in the Gregorian calendar. Now, the festivals, namely Sekrini and Ngoni, falls under this season. 2 very important festivals for the Angamis. They fall under this season, and therefore they are also called as Tisoni. The Metsi covers the months May, July in the Gregorian calendar. And so this one festival called Tekhu Kenyine falls under this season. And also we have the 3rd season called the Terher. This season covers the month of Cherie, which is August and September. Chedani, which is also called as Terhani, right? The festival Terhani, falls under this the season. Now, Baye, the season covers September to December again. So Rigie, September, October, November falls under this. Now, this Rede, Kafani, and Terhani are celebrated. 2 festivals again, Kafani and Terhani are celebrated during this season, and thus they are called as Bayeni. All right. So, those, I think those words will be too alien to, those are participating this session. But anyhow, so I will just, sort of conclude this very concise presentation by a statement recorded by J.H. Hutton in his book, The Angami Nagas, written and published in the year 1921. Recorded of the Angami Nagas. And he said, normally the Angami months consist of 30 days each, and an intercalary month is inserted vaguely every year or 4 years, the year of insertion being spoken as the 13th month year. So the 13th month year is also called as the Kenu, as I mentioned earlier, the leap year, okay, where an extra month is added near February during the leap year as the Gregorian calendar. The name of the month literally means remembering a generation after 3 years. And so to sum it up in a nutshell, for the sake of this presentation, the timeline that the Angami Nagas followed has been intrinsically, to my observation, woven with their socio-cultural and economic activities and practices. Like every other people in the world since ancient times, even though it is not known whether the Angamis knew the concept of a week and that the 7 days made a week in the modern times, as we understand in the modern times. The Angamis had to plan their activities according to the changes of season, primarily originating from the fact that certain seasons are favorable for certain types of activities. So with that, I will conclude my paper. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for, it was a spot on presentation within 10 minutes. And I must actually say thank you for investigating into the culture and traditions of Angami tribe and presenting such an interesting paper on discussing so many details about the timeline of Angami Nagas and all that. It was actually a very interesting paper for me. I was really engrossed because I had been last week. I was in Nagaland. I was there to attend the Hornbill Festival, and yeah, and I was in Kohima with the Highland Institute. So it was so good to even come back to what you were saying. It was really nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
So shall we move on to the next paper? If the presenter is here, can they please turn on their camera and start? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Very good afternoon, respected chair and all my co-presenters. I'm Dr. Suparna Karkun, and I would want to present my paper, so just allow me to share my screen.
Yeah, sure. So settle down properly. I need a proper look. You need to share the PPT, ma'am. We can't see your PPT yet.
Yeah, just a minute, ma'am. I'll do that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, ma'am. Is my PPT visible?
Maybe it'll take a minute. Let's see. Not yet, ma'am. You just need to share slide. I think you have to go with the share slide.
Yes, I'm clicking on share, but I guess I'll just cancel and reshare again, ma'am.
It's okay. Yeah.
Is it visible now, ma'am?
Not yet. Or if you can share the PPT with the moderator, maybe she can put it on. Or to me also. Is there any chance you can do that? Or you can carry on without the PPT. Like you can see the PPT, right? You can go on with that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Not yet visible, ma'am?
No, not yet. Even your video is turned off. You might have to shut down. I click on the video button again.
Now is it visible?
Yes, it is visible now. Yeah.
Okay.
You'll have to make it full screen because the slide will be very small. The font will be yeah. This is fine. Yeah.
Is it fine? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the title of my paper is The Moral Legacy of Bodhisattva's Teachings in the Select Stories of Jataka Tales. The Jataka Tales consist of 547 stories on the different incarnations of the Buddha. Each of the stories form a rich moral legacy with apt everyday examples of the daily common life happenings. Folk literature is truly represented in the Jataka tales. The various incarnations of Buddha in human or animal form a part of the tales that carry the moral legacy, enabling us to be away from greed, gluttony, anger, and vices that farther us from attaining salvation. Parallelly, these tales also advocate love, peace, brotherhood, and kindness that had been preached by Buddha time and again for the ultimate attainment of enlightenment. This paper explores the ingrained greed, gluttony, and covetousness in the select stories: the pennywise monkey, feast for the dead, the foolhardy jackal from the Jataka tales, and traverses the world of Bodhisattva, the enlightened one. The Jataka contains stories of the former births of Buddha. These tales are voluminous literary legacy of India and relate to the previous birth of the Buddha in the form of man, deva, animal, fairy, sprite, or a mythical character. They are derived from Buddhist as well as non-Buddhist vernacular traditions. It is generally agreed that the earliest Jatakas were a mixture of prose and verse. A Jataka is a universal, though they are identified with particular sites. Researchers have proved that the Jatakas are a proof of Buddhist culture and heritage and legitimize the presence of Buddhist teachings universally. Each Jataka begins with the setting in which the events took place. And I quote, in the past, when Brahmadatta was ruling in Varanasi, the Bodhisattva took birth as, unquote. These also function as the folk tales, and it has been established through research that Dr. D.V.G. Harishchandra, one of Sri Lanka's leading psychiatrists, uses Jataka stories as therapy. Its use can also be an effective mode of psychodrama, the therapeutic role play. Jataka tales are not specific to events or characters. The names of animals are also not specifically used. Their historical worth cannot be undermined, and they provide complete information on the daily habits, customs, and beliefs of the people of India. It is a storehouse of knowledge about India's cultural life and religious morality and teachings. Earlier, the literary and academic value was undermined, but recent research have opened up interesting areas of scholarship. My paper talks about the inherent moral legacy that uh, take us through in these three select short stories. One, The Feast for the Dead. Two, The Pennywise Monkey. And three, The Foolhardy Jackal. Coming to the first story, the story begins with Brahmadatta ruling over Benares, and a well-versed Brahmin wishing to give a feast to the dead asks for one of his pupils to fetch a goat, bathe it, adorn it, and bring it. The goat knew about his past misdeeds and was very happy that his life was about to end all his miseries. So it laughed, but when it thought of the Brahmin, it started crying. When the Brahmin asked the goat his reason for crying and laughing at the same time, the goat said that once, like the Brahmin, he too was a learned Brahmin. And to give a feast for the dead, he killed a goat. For killing that goat, he has had his head cut off, slaughtered 499 times. This is his 500th time. And so he was very happy. But he is sad for the Brahmin because by killing him, the Brahmin will also have to lose his head 500 times. Hearing this, the Brahmin decided not to kill the goat and set it free. But as soon as it set out to graze, the goat was struck by lightning and it died. Bodhisattva thus says, stern is the slayer's doom, which means that a person who slays is bound to face his karma. Thus, Bodhisattva, who was born as a tree, preached to the world that the karmic cycle can never be avoided. What you do comes back to you in more ways than one. Very quickly coming to the second story, The Pennywise Monkey describes the time when Brahmadatta, as a king, had formed a camp in the forest and the Bodhisattva was very near him. The people nearby steamed some peas for the horses to feed and poured them out into a trough. One of the monkeys climbed down from the tree and filled up his hands and mouth with the peas and ran up the tree and began to eat. As he ate, one pea fell down from his hand, and immediately the monkey threw all the peas in his hands and ran down the tree to hunt for the one lost pea. But he could not find the pea and lost all others in the process. Observing this, the Bodhisattva says, such are we, O mighty monarch, such all those that greedy be, losing much to gain, like the monkey and the pea. Thus, the story aptly tells us how greed can make us lose what we already have. A bird in hand surely is worth two in the bush. The third story, or the Jataka, is about the time when Bodhisattva was a lion, fierce and strong. He met a jackal once who prayed to be his servant. The lion agreed, and in return for his service, allowed him the leftovers. The lion asked him to scan for animals who would be his prey and report to him, saying, shine forth in thy might, Lord. The lion would then kill the prey and share his kill with the jackal. The jackal grew fatter and fatter and thought to himself that he too was as mighty as the lion. Thinking so, he told the lion that henceforth the lion should scan the forest and report to him, saying, "Shine forth in thy might, jackal." The lion tried to convince him that only lions could kill, but he would not budge. So the lion scanned the forest and reported that he saw an elephant. The jackal bounded after the elephant and was about to attack him on his trunk, but accidentally fell near his feet. The consequence was that he was trampled, killed, and powdered to dust. Thus, it is said, pride always goes before a fall. So these three select stories that I have taken depict the karmic cycle in the story The Feast for the Dead, greed in the story The Pennywise Monkey, pride and arrogance in The Foolhardy Jackal. These stories are moral legacies that can be used in schools, colleges to make students not to understand the morals despite rather than telling them so directly. These stories since ancient times have been used to tell us the difference between the right and the wrong. So with this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I hope the chair will excuse a few technical difficulties that I faced.
That's Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Actually, no, the technical issues are bound to happen. It's not something we can deal with. It's okay. But the presentation was very clear, and thank you for bringing up the point that these can be used in schools and colleges, preferably schools, because students would definitely appeal to the picture that you have presented. And it was a lovely, colorful presentation as well. I'm glad that you
Thank you
could
so
share
much,
it.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you so
So we'll move on to the next presenter. And I think once the last two presenters are done, I'll open it for the audience, and everyone can give their opinions or questions or queries, whatever they have. We'll address them in the end. So we'll move quickly to the next presenter so that we can save on some time. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this. Is the next presenter here? Can we start? You'll have to switch on your camera, please. If not, we'll move on to the last one. Can I just ask the admin to see if the presenter is not here? Can you just check once if there is any technical problem for the presenter to go on?
Wait a minute, ma'am. I will check and let you know.
Okay. So it's Maria, right? Maria Halim?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it's okay. Meanwhile, if anyone has a question, ma'am, take your time. We can address questions meanwhile if you want. So if any comments or questions based on the previous three papers on Dalit literature and translation, or the Angami tribes timelines, or the moral legacies of Bodhisutra teachings, if anyone has a query, you can address that, because we have time. I think the next presenter will take a couple of minutes to share her slide. Any questions or any queries or any suggestions or comments you have, you can freely share here.
Ma'am, I think the next person is not here, not logged in.
Okay. Okay. So can we move on then? Shall we wait? What do you suggest?
Yes, ma'am. We shall move on.
Okay. So it's the last presenter, right? Only one is left, or do we have to move?
Only one, ma'am. Dr. Subarna Karkun, ma'am.
Okay. Suparna actually presented right now when it came.
Okay, ma'am. That
Suppose.
next person, Shalina Mary VT, she's not here, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So if audience have any comments, like the people present here have any queries or comments, because that will definitely be useful for those who have presented. If you have any thing to suggest or questions or anything, please go on. And if it's no questions, can we go with the next session? What do you suggest, Maria?
Yes, ma'am. Dear participants, if you have any queries, you please ask to the presenters, or else we shall move to the next session.
Okay. If there is no question from the audience, I would like to sum up then.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
People can also type if they have any suggestions. I think this is what a candid discussion should be about, sharing their opinions. If any suggestions later on, also they can type in the chat box. But I would like to sum up that these three papers that were presented now were totally interesting in the sense that they talked about culture, tradition, literature in terms of Dalit. Or it was a very vibrant kind of presentation. I really liked how three were different in their own ways, but also they all looked at how Indian traditions or culture or moral legacies in written literature or similarly that in literature also. They were kind of carried forward, and it's really a good session that I got to be part of. And thank you all three for giving such lovely discussions, like that, such lovely presentation also. And can we move on to the next session? Then maybe we have the next person there. I'm not sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. Can I log up? Like, or should I stay in the?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable presence. And
Thank
you
you.
spent your valuable time and precious time with us, and you shared all your views too. Thank you so much, ma'am. On
Thank you.
behalf of Cape Comoring Trust and Holy Cross College, I thank you, ma'am. And
Thank you.
I thank all the presenters, and they presented well, and they expressed their ideas in an effective way. Thank you so much, dear presenters.